I'm going to start today with the issue that you all wanted to ask about, but I knew you were too shy to do it. And that is what happened 252 years ago tonight, and that is the Boston Tea Party. This is the anniversary of the Boston Tea Party, December 16th, 1773, when about 30 or more young men boarded three vessels in Boston Harbor, broke open about 350 chests of tea, and threw them overboard in protest of the Parliament's insistence that it could tax Americans. That is, it could pass laws that affected the colonists in North America without their representation in Parliament. And that it's a really big day because it's in American history, because it's really what galvanizes the idea that people do have to stand up against the idea that the government can act without the approval of the people. Just saying. Okay. I'm kidding. That's nobody asked about that, but it's big in my mind. I actually would very much like to post a letter about it tonight, but an awful lot of other stuff is going on, so I may not do that. All right. One of the things that happened this weekend that people didn't pay a lot of attention to, and that was that, I'm sorry, that happened yesterday. I'm off. Today's Tuesday, not Monday. And that's that, of course, what took a lot of oxygen is what Roger Ailes, who was the producer at Fox News, the Fox News channel in the 1990s, and really packaged a lot of right-wing politicians, called the orchestra pit theory of politics. And that's the idea, as he said, that if you have two men on a stage and one says, I know how to solve the Middle East question, and the other one falls into the orchestra pit, it's the one who falls into the orchestra pit who's going to get all the attention. And you can see Trump doing this every time attention appears to be sliding away from him. He throws himself into the orchestra pit. And that happened yesterday with the tragic deaths of Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner, his wife, who were murdered in their home. The Trump's reaction to that was hideous. And it has actually caused a bit of a rift even in his MAGA supporters, because Rob Reiner was an avid protector of democracy. But even people who supported the president loved him for his many extraordinary movies. The Princess Bride, for example, A Few Good Men. You know them. I don't need to go through them all. But people were really horrified by Trump's reaction. And then he doubled down on it. And I want you to hold on to that thought just for a minute. I'm not going to belabor it. I think it's long past time for us to stop focusing on Trump and to recognize that everything he does is an attempt to distract us. And the more that we focus on him, the more he gets to call all the shots. But I do want to point out that his behavior yesterday, and for a long time now, but not just over the thing about the Reiners, but also about a speech he gave that was supposed to be about the holidays, and it turned into something about Peruvian vipers and snakes, and somehow his son was tangled up in it, and so on. The what did somebody say to me? The boy ain't quite right. He is his mental acuity has slipped to the point that it's not able to be covered up any longer. And I think what you're going to be seeing now going forward is a lot of scrambling among people who are in the administration or administration adjacent, both to grab as much power as they can, but also to try to get out from any repercussions of their behavior during the administration. So hold on to that thought that Trump's behavior is unacceptable. It is not just a person who is not like many of us, but also somebody who is no longer able to function in any meaningful way. Imagine hiring him to take care of your dog, for example. I think he probably wouldn't do it. I know I wouldn't. And that's a real concern when he is the president of the United States. But while that was going on, and hold that to one side, I do want to call attention to something that didn't get a lot of attention because of the outrage over what was happening yesterday and the sheer horror, of course, of the Reiners murder. And that is that the U.S. military yesterday struck 3 more small boats. These were in the Eastern Pacific, killing 8 more people, which brings the number of people that the U.S. has killed to 95 at least. That's the number that they have provided. And once again, the administration has not given the public or Congress any convincing evidence that these people were, as they say, narco traffickers. Now, I'm going to break that down a little bit because it's important. So, what the administration is, actually, I'm going to go back a little bit before I come back to that. One of the hallmarks of this administration is that it is obfuscating. It is throwing up smoke screens over everything that it's doing. So, it keeps getting dragged into court, but when it does get dragged into court, oh, they have the wrong lawyer, or oh, they don't know who was responsible for this, or oh, they can't really answer that, or this court doesn't have jurisdiction, or maybe something else is going on. And so there is this constant battle to pin down what is actually happening and who did it, which, by the way, is a classic hallmark of gaslighting. That is, we can't have this discussion because one half of the party is not willing to recognize even the basis of the discussion. So that's what the administration does anyway. But in the case of these attacks on the small boats, apparently coming from Venezuela, although at least one Colombian has been involved, the administration says that the U.S. is in armed conflict with gangs that are trafficking drugs. But again, there's a lot of obfuscation around it. So they are suggesting that what they are protecting the United States from is illicit fentanyl, claiming things, for example, like each boat could kill 25,000 people, which is just a wild fantasy. But suggests that what is on those boats is the terribly deadly illicit fentanyl. In fact, what came out today is the administration admitted that what may or may not be on those boats is cocaine. And it's cocaine that is being trafficked across Venezuela and then off to the east for traffic to Europe and to Africa. These are not drugs shipments that are destined to the United States for the most part, even if there are drugs on those ships. So the administration is saying that the U.S. is in armed conflict with the drug traffickers, but, and this is so messy because it's intended to be messy, but they are also saying that they do not have to get the permission of Congress to continue the strikes, which under the 1973 War Powers Act, they do. The president can act without the oversight of Congress for 60 days, and then I think it's 60. It might be 90. September, October, November. It might be 90. I have a problem with 6s and 9s, but they can act with impunity for a certain period of time, and then they must ask Congress for approval to continue those strikes. Now, when the strikes began on September 2nd, on that September 4th, the administration went to Congress and said, we are telling you this happened in order to keep you apprised, as we must under the 1973 War Powers Act. But then when it came time to get permission, they said, no, we don't actually need your permission to do that because we're not actually at war. But by the same token, they're saying they can kill the people on those boats because we're in armed conflict. And, this came out today when somebody pointed out that, in fact, drug trafficking in the United States is not a crime that is punishable by death. And what the administration says is, yes, but we're at war with those people. So that means you can kill them, which is, the legal observers are like, this is such a no-go. We can't even begin to tell you. And then there is, in addition to that, the strike of September 2nd, which was there was a first strike that hit a small boat that had 11 people on it, killed 9 of them. 2 people were survivors. 41 minutes later, they hit that boat again. And virtually every legal analyst that I have seen has said that that is either murder, in case if we're not at war, or it is a war crime if we are at war. And this has been very much sort of lighting a fire under even Republicans in Congress because the administration is refusing to release the the uncut video of that second strike. So today, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and by the way, it is the Secretary of Defense until Congress changes it. Although we've spent up to $2 billion changing the word defense to war around the world. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and Secretary of State Marco Rubio gave briefings to the House and the Senate in which both senators and House members on the Democratic side and some Republicans said, you didn't tell us anything here about why you think this is legal. We are still not convinced. And again, Hegseth and Rubio did not show Congress members the full video of the second. There were 4 strikes on September 2nd. One hit the boat the first time, one hit the flotsam with the people on it, and 2 more then to destroy the debris from the water, allegedly so that it would not become a navigation hazard. But these were really quite small boats, and it's quite a big ocean. So you can draw your own conclusions about why they felt it was imperative to get rid of the debris from those strikes. So the administration has said now that they will show the full video to the House and Senate Armed Services Committee tomorrow. We'll see. But the fact that they are refusing to show that video at the same time that they are continuing to kill people, allegedly for drug trafficking in such a way that it hurts the United States, is truly problematic. And, one of the things about it is, it is getting attention. It's getting a lot of attention, but it is essentially a situation where the administration, whether it's Pete Hegseth doing this or Donald Trump or both, is declaring that it has the power to kill people by simply saying you're an enemy, and therefore that I don't have to give a reason. I don't have to talk to Congress about whether I'm at war. I simply get to be the lawmaker, and then the police officer, and then the judge, and then the jury, and the executioner. And that's a really big deal. And it's a really big deal now that I think about it. On a day when people who lived in what became the United States of America said, you cannot make rules over our lives without including us in them. And the government, not the government, the administration is flouting those rules, flouting the 1973 War Powers Act. So that happened, and I wanted to call it out because it's really important. And it is, people are focusing on that second strike as being a war crime or whatever. But I'm sorry, Jan, I seem to have highlighted you. I don't know how or why. But it's not just that second strike on September 2nd. The entire operation is shrouded in mystery, and it is deeply, deeply problematic. Okay, so that's one of the things that not a lot of people asked about, but that seemed really important. Now, what's going on with that? Those 2 things I just identified. First of all, the president is not in good shape. He is losing whatever control he ever had over himself and over his administration. And you appear to have people like Defense Secretary Hegseth doing a lot of stuff that is iffy. And I would include Stephen Miller, the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, in that category of people who are operating without as much oversight as people in the Oval Office normally would have. And he's the person who's in charge of the deportation sweeps and the sheer cruelty toward undocumented immigrants, and also other people who are swept up. And he is also working apparently in tandem with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who's working with Corey Lewandowski, her advisor, and who is running the Homeland Security social media feed, which at this point is pretty openly just Nazi. It's white supremacist. It is using a lot of neo-Nazi terms, and is kind of out there on its own, but they're not even dog whistles anymore. They're announcing through words like remigration, which is an important word in the radical white supremacist world. That they have fully bought into white nationalism and the idea of recreating sort of a fascist Nazi world. So you got that going on. But then I want to take a look at the other people in the administration, because I'm going somewhere with this. Think about the people in the administration that are the headliners. So think about Kash Patel, for example, the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the FBI. He keeps screwing up again and again and again. There was a horrific shooting at Brown University this weekend that took 2 lives and wounded 9 other people physically. Many more people are wounded mentally. And that always strikes me as something we ought to be more upfront about. When we think about mass shootings, people tend to sort of say, oh, there were this many people killed, which is horrific on its own. But those physical wounds will never go away, but neither will the psychic wounds for the people who were part of that shooting. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. It just always bothers me. If you've ever lost someone to gun violence, you know it's not like, oh, well. So once again, Kash Patel jumped the starting line and announced that the FBI had gotten somebody, a person of interest, and was holding a person of interest. Well, that person, the name of that person leaked, went out over social media. Within hours, the police and the FBI had let this person go and said, oopsie poopsie, he wasn't the person we were looking for. The actual mass shooter is still at large. And now the administration, Trump, is trying to say, well, it's not our problem. That's the Brown police who should handle that, which is just, of course, ridiculous. But you've got then Kash Patel, who's once again not looking so great. Then you've got Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, who completely flubbed the Epstein files and has turned the Department of Justice into a place where Trump can exact punishment on those he perceives to be his enemies. Retribution is the wrong word. People keep using it, but retribution means you have been hurt, so you have hurt back, or you want to hurt back. In fact, the people that Trump is trying to punish didn't go out to hurt him. They were enforcing the law that he had run up against. So she has turned that, the Department of Justice, into that. But look at Linda McMahon at the Department of Education, where she's gutted it. You know, she's cut all kinds of people. That's being challenged in the courts. Look at people like Doug Burgum at the Department of the Interior, who essentially turned Interior over to an operative from Project 2025, and who now appears to be concentrating on Trump's attempt to remake Washington, D.C. Who am I forgetting here? You've got Marco Rubio, who has overturned as Secretary of State, who has overturned 80 years of foreign policy to bring back into vogue the idea of spheres of influence, which is the system that led us into World Wars I and II. You've essentially got chaos, basically. You've got, and a vice president, you got J.D. Vance, who's trying desperately to get his chips in order for 2028. And so is really kind of moving toward the far right young wing of the Republican Party by courting those young Republicans who are at this point Nazi adjacent. You know, you've just got a mess on your hands. All right, so I gave you all that because the other big news today is an interview published in Vanity Fair by a journalist named Chris Whipple, who did 11 interviews with White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles over the time from immediately before the administration to just before publication, in which he talked to her at the times of what he considered to be all of the major crises so far in the administration. And what has come from that is it's a long interview. There's 2 sections of it. It's a long interview. And it portrays a White House that is chaotic. It also is worth thinking about why Wiles gave these interviews. So, you know, one of the things that historians do is you never, ever, ever take any interview at face value. You have to think about Why? The first thing is, why is somebody recording this document, this photograph, making this television show? Why are they doing it? Then you have to think about a bunch of things as well. What is the audience, and what is, when is it happening, and who is recording it? There's all sorts of things we go through, but it seems as if when a member of an administration does these long series of interviews, and the comparison that one would make is to David Stockman, who gave a series of interviews to what was at the time the Atlantic Monthly during the Reagan administration, which have been like solid gold for historians. I mean, they I've used them. I can't tell you how many times I've used them, but in this case, partly, I think, the people who were engaged in the Trump administration this time around believed, as did many of those who were trying to overthrow the government on January 6, 2021, that they were ushering in a new country. They were ushering in a new world. And they wanted to make a note of it. They wanted to keep a record of it. So, for example, on January 6, 2021, you had Lauren Boebert, who was a newly elected representative from Colorado, putting out on social media, which is still there, by the way. Last time I checked, I haven't checked probably in 6 weeks, but this is 1776. I mean, they clearly thought they were doing something new. Susie Wiles is the person who was behind hiring a lot of the people whose names I just mentioned, with the idea that they would destroy what she called the deep state, that they would create this new government. They would usher in a world that got rid of what they consider the welfare state and create this new world. So partly it seems like she wanted to keep a record. But it seems as if the way that the language in the interviews, the way it's produced, and remember, we are getting what the journalist thought was important out of these many, many hours of interviews, that she seems to be trying to distance herself and perhaps the president from the troubles of this administration. So, for example, she has very little good to say about Elon Musk, whom she blames for destroying USAID and PEPFAR, the president's attempt to halt the spread of AIDS, a great program started by George W. Bush when he was in office. She seems to blame Elon Musk for that. She suggests that she didn't have much to say about Trump's pardoning of the January 6th rioters. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what some of the other ones were. She calls the Russell Voted office at the Office of Management and Budget, the guy who was instrumental in writing the Project 2025, right-wing absolute zealot. Basically it feels like she is trying to distance herself from things. And she does admit that Trump is on a tour to hurt people. Suggests that that's really on him, that she told him he could have 3 months to hurt people, and now he has pushed that further. But what's interesting about it is that after the interview came out this morning, she and many of the people around her tried to say that tried to do the same sorts of things that Trump does. Say this is the press is lying. I never said this. And of course, the guy isn't stupid. He's got the files. And he's been saying, actually, here's exactly what you said. And that's exactly what I quoted, which, by the way, is like journalism 101. That it's not like you say, oh, I think I remember this and write it down. You either have it on tape or you don't, or you have it in a document or you don't. So it's worth remembering when she gave this, that she was being disingenuous. And there's a lot of lies in it. There's a lot of things that are simply not true that the journalist wrote down. For example, she says at one point that the January 6th rioters got heavier sentences than sentencing guidelines suggested, and therefore it was fine to pardon them. In fact, they all got sentences that were below the guidelines for the crimes that they had committed. And there are a lot of things like that in there that are showing that she is trying to spin things in a way that makes at least her and perhaps the administration look better than it ought to. But what's interesting is I pulled this for you because when it came out, she gave a statement on social media. I don't remember which one. Yeah, social media. She made a statement in which she said, "The article published early this morning is a disingenuously framed hit piece on me and the finest president, White House staff, and cabinet in history." And again, some people have tried to suggest that she didn't know she was being recorded, but come on, 11 interviews? This is like, again, she, I got nothing on that. I mean, of course she knew she's being recorded. Of course she knew it was on the record. If you don't say it's not on the record, it's on the record. She goes on to say, significant context was disregarded, and much of what I and others said about the team and the president was left out of the story. I assume after reading it that this was done to paint an overwhelmingly chaotic and negative narrative about the president and our team. Now, interestingly enough, I did read it, and I actually thought it was typically as people are discussing it, they're pulling the pieces of it that they think are the most shocking, but it didn't seem to me to be an unfair portrait at all. And then she goes on to say, the truth is we've accomplished so much and we're the best thing since sliced bread and so on. But it's interesting that she said, so much of what I said about the president was left out of the story, which suggests that he ain't happy with the story to the degree that he has heard what's in it, which is probably only what's on media. But again, the reason I am pointing to that is because I think it continues to spell out the fact that the administration, as it approaches its the end of its first year in office, is increasingly chaotic. It is increasingly out of control, and the world is starting to catch up with it. So, like, one of the things that she said, and again, take this all with a grain of salt because we don't know, that we know Trump is in the files, the Epstein files, but there's nothing, she says, there's nothing bad in it, right? And again, another place where she's disingenuous says that the image from the Epstein estate of the card with the prepubescent girl on it with something written over it and signed by Donald Trump, she says he didn't do that, which again, the Wall Street Journal journalists have, right? So who are you going to trust on that one? I'm going with the journalists. And she also went on to say that so Trump's in the files, but that Bill Clinton did not. She says there's no evidence in those files. She says that Bill Clinton visited Epstein's island. She says the president was wrong about that. So what you're already starting to see here, and I think you're going to see more of it, is the president trying to spin those files depending on what comes out. They're supposed to, by law, come out on the 19th. Today's the 16th, so Friday. They're supposed to be out on Friday. And you're already seeing rumors that there are memos trying to see how the Republicans can spin the Epstein files and so on. But I think you can already see this happening here. So I guess if you think about today, let me see what else there's here that you had asked about. The other thing, I'm sorry, I got to tell you, there's many more things have happened, but there is a couple of things that are of interest. There is, first of all, that House Speaker Mike Johnson has refused to bring up the House measure to extend the premium tax credits for the Affordable Care Act. And that's, almost 80% of Americans want those extended. So this is a real kick in the teeth for Americans. There is also the news that the administration is going after Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, full bore now. That, again, further a sign of anger and frustration there. Job numbers out today show the economy is stagnating, that jobs are, we're at the lowest, highest unemployment rate in 4 years. And crucially here, I thought this was another thing that was revealing is, as I wrote about over the weekend, the um, historic National Trust for Historic Preservation and preservation law firm has sued to stop Trump from building the ballroom that he's trying to build, where the east wing of the White House used to be. And today the White House came out and said they have to build it for national security reasons, which is really interesting for a couple of things. One, their argument is not a bad one. The argument is that there was under the East Wing the headquarters for the security for the White House, which again Trump would have thought of before he knocked it down. But the other reason it's interesting is because Trump is very heavily leaning into the July 2024 Supreme Court decision called Donald J. Trump v. US, v. United States, that says that so long as a president is operating within his official duties, that he can't be prosecuted for crimes. And one of those official duties is national security. So they gave him a lot of leeway on that. So now he is more and more saying, I have to do this because of national security. And you're seeing that with the tariffs too. You're seeing Trump saying this is about national security. Today you saw, I think it was today, maybe yesterday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying we have to do tariffs for national security. That's what you're going to see again and again and again. So I'm going to leave you with this. Trump announced this evening that he is going to give a national speech tomorrow night at 9:00. And that's going to be really interesting, because you've asked me to speculate about what it's going to be. I haven't a clue. But I will say that you can think this one through a little bit. That is, you've got a man who is losing his grip on the presidency. He's losing his grip on himself, and he's losing his grip on the presidency. All of his major issues, all of them, are underwater with voters. People don't like what he's doing on the economy, what he's doing with immigration. They don't like what he's doing with Ukraine. They don't like what he's doing with the rebuilding of the different buildings in Washington, D.C. I mean, he's really not looking good on all of those issues. And certainly you've got the issue hanging out there of Venezuela. Over all of that, which, by the way, he has suggested Susie Wiles suggested is about regime change, not about drug traffickers, which we all pretty much knew, but there you go. Susie Wiles actually said it in that interview. But then over all this, you have the Epstein files coming out on Friday. And then in addition to that, you've got the fact he has egg on his face from the way he behaved yesterday over the murder of these, quite beloved American icons. What do you think he's going to say tomorrow? I mean, again, I'm not holding back that I have some secret here, but it strikes me that this is a man who is desperate to get the focus of attention back on himself, and to try and regain the control of the narrative, and to try and regain momentum. And for what it's worth, he tried to do the same thing when Hegseth called all those military officers to Washington, and everybody was like, what are they going to do? Are they going to, are they going to launch a war? What are they going to do? And basically they just harangued them and then told them all to go again. And if you look at the timing of that, you can see now why they did that at the time, because it was pretty clear that they were doing things in the Caribbean that a lot of officers had a hard time with, and were probably talking to their legal advisors to see if they could do those things. And so they called them all in and said, you got to do what we say. This is another moment where it appears that Trump needs to regain control of the narrative. And that is what he's going to be trying to do tomorrow. He could do it by making a big announcement, or he could try and fail the same way he did in October. And we'll hear more about pythons or whatever, vipers or whatever it was. By the way, I love snakes, so don't take that like I'm making fun of the snakes. I just don't think that was what was supposed to be part of the discussion in the last couple of days. So we'll see where this goes, but it's a fascinating time because these people are dangerous. They have control of the most powerful military in the world. They have control of the most powerful government in the world, and they're doing hideous things with it, both to our undocumented neighbors and increasingly to American citizens, including using facial recognition techniques to identify people and so on. But at the same time, they are deeply unpopular and they're incompetent. And which one of those is going to win out is your guess as good as mine. Except I will point out once again that 252 years ago, at a time when things looked pretty damn chaotic, and it looked as if at the time the most powerful navy in the world was going to be able to take care of a ragtag bunch of settlers in only 13, after all, of the North American colonies. The other ones said no thank you. They managed to light resistance on fire. So I don't know. I just feel so strange that we're reliving all this 250 years later. But that's what the view looks like for me tonight.